I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate.
Hello students, welcome to the class. Today we are going to talk about the concept of intelligence. The main objectives in this lesson are to understand the definition of intelligence, the nature of intelligence and brief history of testing movement, and also Binet contribution to intelligence testing. I am sure you will agree with me when I say that we human beings are powerful ones on the earth when compared to other species. This power is not because of our physical size or strength, but because of our exceptional cognitive abilities and intelligence. Intelligence is a term which we commonly use in our everyday life. An individual's potential for growth, development and maturity relies on his or her intelligence level. Intelligence involves the ability to learn from experiences, thinking in abstract terms and dealing effectively with one's environment or society. In society's view, an individual is considered to be intelligent if he or she is bright in academics, successful self-made profession, excellent in scientific or technological field, familiar with creative ideas, capable of rising above others and contribute service to solve major problems in a society. So basically, the intelligence of a person is reflected in his or her behavior. For a singer like Lata Mangeshkar, the intelligence is reflected in her understanding of musical notes and the way she can sing those notes correctly and with melody. Similarly, for a sports person like Sachin Tendulkar, intelligence is shown in his understanding of the game and its execution. Now let us start with understanding the definition of intelligence. Offering a precise definition of intelligence is quite challenging because of its multi-dimensional nature that represents immense potentiality of humans. However, different psychologists have opted different aspects of intelligent behavior and made an attempt to define intelligence. Now some of these intelligence definitions are: first is Spearman. According to him, intelligence is the capacity of the organism to adjust itself to an increasing environment. Then Gardner Murphy says that intelligence means the ability to learn and the ability to increase steadily with the complexity of the nervous system. Spiken and McCandless define intelligence as what the intelligence test generally measures. Then Wickens and Mayers says and defines intelligence as the degree of proficiency with which the individual solves problems, deals with abstract materials, verbalizes and learns new material. Then initially David Wechsler in 1944 stated intelligence as a global concept that involves an individual's ability to act purposefully, think rationally and deal effectively with the environment. Later, Wechsler added that intelligence is the capacity of an individual to understand the world about him and his resourcefulness to cope with its challenges. According to Sternberg, intelligence comprises the mental abilities necessary for adaptation to as well as shaping and selection of environmental context. Though the task of defining the concept of intelligence scientifically is an ongoing process, from the above mentioned definitions, we can understand that intelligence is the ability to learn, ability to adjust, ability to think abstractly, and it is a global capacity. Then we are going to discuss about what is nature of intelligence. The first people to think about nature of intelligence were neither psychologists nor educators but philosophers. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato compared people's intelligence to blocks of wax, differing in size, hardness, moistness and purity. A person whose block of wax was overly hard or soft or impure would suffer intellectual deficits. Next, Thomas Aquinas of 13th century believed that comprehensive skills of intelligent people to be more nearly complete and universal than those of unintelligent people. The 18th century philosopher Immanuel Kant believed that there are different kinds of intelligence, or perhaps different facets of intelligence, and people clearly differed in the degree to which they possess them. This idea about the nature of intelligence have existed for years. These early philosophical explorations of human intellect played a very important role in the exploration of intelligence research that occurred in 20th century. In 20th century, the research of intelligence went to new high. The nature of intelligence is expressed as follows. Intelligence since long has been considered as an innate capacity, but with studies conducted by some experts like Jean Piaget and 𝗕𝗏𝗪, it was realized that the inborn capacity does not develop into effective intelligence without stimulation from the environment. Interaction with the environment helps the individual to learn the competencies necessary for dealing with life problems. Next unique feature of intelligence is that it is not restricted to any specific activity, domain or context. Rather, it is reflected in various activities such as academic related success, social interactions, decision making, understanding emotions and performing successfully daily activities in an organized manner. Hence, it is considered as a general ability. With the growing research and studies, understanding about the nature of intelligence has changed significantly. The recent findings on nature of intelligence also highlighted the affective and social domain. To understand further nature of intelligence, we need to know the classification of intelligence given by E.L. Thorndike and Garrett. According to them, there are three types of intelligence. First is concrete intelligence. It is the ability of an individual to comprehend actual situations and to react to them adequately. The concrete intelligence is evident from various activities of daily life. This type of intelligence is applicable when individual is handling concrete objects. Engineers, mechanics and architects have this type of intelligence. Next type is abstract intelligence. It is the ability to respond to words, numbers and symbols. Abstract intelligence is required in the academic subjects in school. This is acquired after an intensive study of books and literature. Teachers, lawyers, doctors and philosophers need this type of intelligence. Finally, it is social intelligence. This means the ability of an individual to react to social situation of daily life. Adequate adjustment in social situations is the index of social intelligence. People having this type of intelligence know the art of winning friends and influencing them. Leaders, members of diplomatic sources and social workers have it. Thus, we see that nature of intelligence is the ability to adjust to environment, ability to perceive relationship between various objects and methods, ability to solve problems, ability to think independently, ability to benefit from one's own experience and experience of others. Now, let us talk about brief history of testing movement. The origin of intelligence testing has a special place in the history of psychological testing movement. Intelligence testing, although called by many different names and used in many different forms, has been around for many centuries. The Chinese have been using mental tests for 3000 years, and in the 7th and 8th centuries, the imperial court established tests of speaking and writing and verbal and non-verbal reasoning that are similar to tasks on today's tests. The ancient Greeks followers of Socrates and universities in Middle Ages all developed methods of assessing intelligence skills. The 1800s saw the beginning of the development of ideas about mental abilities and methods of measuring intelligence. These ideas form the foundation for contemporary assessment. First, we will talk about contribution of Francis Galton. The English biologist Galton was primarily responsible for developing the first comprehensive individual intelligence test. In 1884, as a part of his research of men of genius and the heredity of intelligence, he administered tasks of the sensory discrimination and sensory motor coordination in his anthropometric laboratory. His belief that intelligence comes to us through the senses led to development of tasks such as weight discrimination, reflection time, strength of squeeze and visual discrimination. But his efforts were not successful in differentiating individuals according to their intellectual abilities. Although his studies offered few conclusive results, Galton raised many important questions about the concept of intelligence, which paved the way for the further research. Later in the early 1890s, Cattell, an assistant in Galton's laboratory, established similar laboratories in the United States. During this time, Cattell used the term mental test for the first time in the psychological literature. Cattell shared Galton's view that intelligence is the best measured through sensory tasks, but expanded his mentor's ideas by emphasizing that test administration must be standardized so that results are comparable from person to person and time to time. It was Alfred Binet who did a lot of contribution to the intelligence testing. In the early 1900s, significant advances were made in both individual and group intelligence testing. It led to modern testing movement headed by French psychologist Alfred Binet in France. Alfred Binet, assisted by Theodore Simon and Victor Henry, rejected Galton's notions about the sensory and motor aspects of intelligence and claimed that tests of higher mental processes more actively distinguish among the individual differences in people's intellectual abilities. This group developed numerous tests of complex intellectual functions such as memory, comprehension, imagination and moral sentiments. During the early 1900s, the French government asked Binet to help decide which students were more likely to experience difficulty in school. The government had passed laws requiring that all French children attend school, so that it was important to find a way to identify children who would need specialized assistance. Binet and his colleague Theodore Simon began developing questions that focused on areas not overtly taught in schools, such as attention, memory and problem solving skills. Using these questions, Binet determined which ones served as the best predictors of school success. He quickly realized that some children were able to answer more advanced questions that older children were generally able to answer. Based on this observation, Binet suggested that concept of mental age is important, which is a measure of intelligence based on the average abilities of children of a certain age group. Two of the most important aspects of Binet approach to intelligence testing were that he discarded the specific test for the specific ability and took a group of tests which seemed to cover in general the chief psychological characteristics that go to make up intelligence. And further, as the norm or standard of intelligence, he took what average child at each age could do. In 1905, they published Binet-Simon test, which focused on verbal abilities of children. Later, Binet-Simon scale revised in 1911 extended through adulthood. It was almost immediately adapted and translated in the United States. The most successful revision was Terman-Stanford Binet scale in 1916. Terman carefully standardized his scale and introduced the application of the term intelligent quotients, which is mental age divided by chronological age multiplied by 100. The Stanford Binet was widely adapted by individual examiners in the United States, and it is still popular today. The Binet was revised and re-standardized in 1937. It was again revised in 1960. Then in 1972, it was again re-standardized. In 1937 Binet scale, the ratio IQ was retained, but in the 1960 and 1972 scale, it was replaced by something called as deviation IQ, which has the standard score mean of 100 and standard deviation of 16. A thoroughly new version of Binet was released in 2004. It was David Wechsler in the year 1939 who challenged the Stanford Binet monopoly on individual intelligence test by publishing his Wechsler-Bellevue scale. Wechsler, like Binet, included the concept of global intelligence in his scale, but instead of having one score as standard Binet scale, he included 3 scores: a verbal IQ, a performance IQ and a full-scale IQ. 𝗧𝗏 did not employ methodology of Stanford Binet, which used a large number of brief and primarily verbal tasks. His scale was limited to a small number of longer tasks. Half of them were verbal and half of them were non-verbal. Several versions of 𝗧𝗏 scales have been published since his 𝗧𝗏's 𝗵𝗡 scale, and the type of task on later versions are virtually identical to the first scale. The main sources of 𝗧𝗏's verbal tasks were the Binet and the Army Group Examination Alpha. His performance tests came primarily from Army Group Examination Beta and Army Individual Performance Scale. The widespread use of group intelligence tests began, like the first Binet scale, to meet a practical need. The entry of United States in the World War I in 1917 required a rapid means of classifying 1.5 million recruits for the assignment into different types of training, discharge from the service and officer ability. A committee of American Psychological Association headed by Robert M. 𝗪𝗓𝗂 was directed to develop two group intelligence tests. These came to be known as Army Alpha and Army Beta. The former, a verbal test modelled after Binet, was designed for general use with literate recruits. The later employed non-verbal items and was designed for illiterate recruits or those recent immigrants who could not speak English well. These tests were released for civilian use soon after the war ended. Because of the belief that intelligence tests were better than teacher evaluations for identifying abilities, these tests became widely accepted in education. A short time after, revisions of the Army tests as well as new group intelligence tests that use the Army test as models were being administered to thousands of preschool through graduate students all over the world, and also to special adult groups such as employees of prisoners. The group format was attractive because it allowed the testing of many individuals simultaneously, and it incorporated simple administration procedures that required little examiner training. Intelligence tests, both group and individual, are used in many different ways today. The largest users of intelligence tests are schools. Group intelligence tests are used at preschool and kindergarten level to distinguish children who are ready to participate in educational activities from those who need remedial preparation. At the elementary, middle and high school levels, group tests are used to identify exceptional students and to aid in forming homogeneous ability groups within classrooms. Group intelligence tests are commonly used as one criteria for admission into colleges and universities. Coming to individual tests, which have been administered for over half a century by well-trained clinicians for psychological and psychoeducational and neuropsychological diagnosis. Subsequent revisions resulted in the common use of individual intelligence tests as a part of larger assessment batteries for the placement of children in a special education programs for the mentally retarded, learning disabled, emotionally disturbed and so forth, and for the development of individual educational programs for these children. For adults, group and individual tests are used in variety of settings, including business and industry, prisons, mental health centers, hospitals and private clinical practice. Group intelligence tests find their principal application in education, business, government, military and in circumstances where it is feasible to obtain valid test data from many individuals at once. They are useful as well with individuals who are able to take a test by themselves without need of an examiner. In contrast, individual intelligence tests are used in clinics and special education centers where an intensive study of individual client is needed and trained examiner is necessary to secure valid test results. The reasons for using group and individual tests are many and provide a basis for understanding intelligence in a better way. Intelligence testing has been a controversial topic since 1960s. The most pressing issues that are debated within both professional and public forums concern test bias, the influence of heredity versus environment on IQ, race differences in test scores and disproportionate placement of minority children into special education classes, such as those for the retarded or gifted. These issues have been subject of research, debate, arguments, and further research. It is likely that the future will be filled with arguments on the appropriate use of intelligence tests and claims that they should be banned. At the same time, it is equally certain that there will continue to be production of new and revised instruments of both the individual and group variety, as assessment of intelligence is an important factor in predicting human behavior. Case study: the Flynn effect. Have you ever experienced a situation wherein you are talking to a child and realized, when I was of that child's age, I was not so intelligent, or I didn't know many things? I am sure many of us came across such situation. This interesting situation has a name, which is the Flynn effect. James R. Flynn discovered that IQ scores increase from a generation to the next. Thus, the Flynn effect deals with the issue of how general IQ scores of a population change over time. The reasons for this effect are many. First, it is increase in education. In many countries across the globe, the level of education and schooling is increasing. People are spending a larger amount of time in learning. This has increased the intelligence level of the next generation. Then second is more stimulating environment. The general environment today is much more complex and stimulating. One of the most striking 20th century change in the increased intellectual environment has come from the increase of exposure to many types of media, from pictures on the wall to movies to television to video games to computers. Each successive generation has been exposed to richer information than the one before. Also, environmental changes resulting from modernization, such as more intellectually demanding work, greater use of technology, and smaller families, have meant that a much larger proportion of people are more accustomed to manipulating abstract concepts such as hypotheses and categories than a century ago. Third cause is improved nutrition, which is another possible explanation why IQ increases over time. IQ gains are results of better worldwide nutrition. The idea behind this is that better nourished brains would allow subjects to perform better on everyday activities. Therefore, because populations experience IQ gains over time, IQ tests must be constantly re-standardized so that subjects are not scored against inaccurate norms. Let us summarize what we have learnt in today's lesson. Because of its multidimensional nature, defining intelligence has always been a difficult task. However, many theorists gave their views or definitions. Among them, Spearman, Wechsler and Sternberg are very popular. From the various definitions of intelligence, it is considered as the ability to learn, to adjust, to think abstractly, and is a global capacity. Speaking about nature of intelligence, it is believed that the idea about this has existed over years. Early Greek philosophers Plato and Thomas Aquinas gave their idea about nature of intelligence and helped in exploration of intelligence in 20th century. Intelligence is considered as an innate capacity initially, but later research proved that importance of environment is also necessary. It is also not restricted to one domain or context. Thorndike and Garrett proposed three types of intelligence. First is concrete intelligence, second is abstract intelligence, and the third one is social intelligence. Next, we learnt about history of testing movement. The concept of intelligence testing was there for centuries. It was first proposed by Francis Galton, but it is contribution of Alfred Binet which played an important role. Binet created intelligence tests which are very useful, and even today people follow Binet's model of intelligence testing. His intelligence testing was used by American psychologists in World War I, and also many popular theorists like Wechsler built his own theory on Binet's model. Therefore, contribution of Binet to intelligence testing is immense. intelligence testing is an important concept, though there are certain limitations and controversies around it, but today for every aspect in education, in business and industry, intelligence testing plays an important role in understanding intelligence of an individual, therefore predicting their behavior in future.